The morning I turned 25, I woke to the smell of burnt coffee and the sound of my mother crying in the kitchen. Not the soft, delicate tears she sometimes shed during Hallmark commercials, but deep, guttural sobs that seemed to shake the walls of our small ranch house in suburban Ohio. The air felt heavy, thick with humidity even though it was only March, and I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs before my feet even touched the cold hardwood floor. I pulled on my old college sweatshirt, the one with the frayed cuffs that smelled faintly of lavender detergent, and padded down the hallway. The floorboards creaked under my weight, announcing my presence, but Mom didn't stop crying. Through the doorway, I could see her hunched over the kitchen table, her shoulders trembling, her graying hair falling loose from the bun she always wore. The fluorescent light above her flickered, casting strange shadows across the yellow wallpaper we had always meant to replace but never did. Dad stood by the window, his back to both of us, staring out at the neighbor's fence like it held the answers to questions nobody had asked yet. His flannel shirt was buttoned wrong, something I had never seen in my entire life. My father was a man of precision, a retired accountant who lined up his shoes in the closet with military exactness and folded his newspaper into perfect thirds before reading it. I felt my stomach drop, that sensation like missing a step in the dark. Something was catastrophically wrong. "Mom," I said, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. The word seemed to hang in the air between us, fragile as spun glass. "What's going on? What happened?" She looked up at me then, and I saw her face was blotchy and red, her eyes swollen almost shut. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. No sound came out. Dad turned from the window, and I saw tears streaming down his withered cheeks, cutting paths through the stubble he had forgotten to shave. "Sweetheart," he said, and his voice cracked on the word. "We need to talk to you about something. Something we should have told you a long time ago." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. I could smell the burnt coffee more strongly now, acrid and bitter, mixing with the faint scent of my mother's rose perfume and something else, something like fear, sharp and metallic. My hand started to shake, so I gripped the back of one of the kitchen chairs, feeling the smooth wood under my palms, worn soft by years of family dinners and homework sessions and late-night conversations. "Okay," I said, though nothing about this felt okay. The refrigerator hummed loudly in the corner, a sound I had heard 10,000 times before but which now seemed ominous, threatening. My mother stood up, her chair scraping against the linoleum with a sound that made me wince. She walked toward me, her movements slow and deliberate, like she was walking through water. When she reached me, she took my hands in hers. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the kitchen, and I could feel them trembling against my skin. "Cassie," she whispered, and I had never heard my name sound like that before, like an apology and a prayer all at once. "You're our daughter. You'll always be our daughter. Nothing changes that. Nothing." But something was about to change. I could feel it in the air, in the way my father couldn't meet my eyes, and the way my mother's grip on my hands tightened until it almost hurt. "I'm not your biological daughter," I said, the words coming out flat and certain. I don't know how I knew, but suddenly it was the only thing that made sense. "You adopted me." My mother's face crumpled, and she pulled me into her arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I could feel her heart racing against my cheek, could smell the familiar scent of her skin, could feel the dampness of her tears soaking into my sweatshirt. "No," my father said from behind us, his voice rough and broken. "No, sweetheart. It's not that simple." I pulled back from my mother, confusion flooding through me. The kitchen tilted slightly, and I had to grip the chair again to steady myself. If I wasn't adopted, then what? What could possibly be worse than finding out your parents weren't your biological parents? Sit down, honey, Mom said, guiding me to a chair. Her hands on my shoulders felt like weights, pressing me down. I sat, and she sat beside me, still holding one of my hands. Dad came and sat across from us, and for a long moment, nobody spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching out like taffy. Your mother, Dad finally said, then stopped. He cleared his throat, a harsh sound in the quiet kitchen. The woman you know as your mother, she's not, she didn't. He stopped again, pressing his palms against his eyes. I gave birth to you, Mom said quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. I carried you for 9 months. I felt you kick. I went through 23 hours of labor. You are mine, Cassie. You came from my body. My head spun. I looked between them, trying to understand. Then what? I started, but my throat closed up. I swallowed hard, tasting something bitter. Then what's the problem? Dad looked at Mom, and something passed between them, some silent communication born of 30 years of marriage. Mom's hand tightened on mine again, and I felt a bead of sweat roll down my spine despite the chill I suddenly felt. Your father, Mom said, and her voice broke on the word. The man sitting across from us, he's not, she couldn't finish. I'm not your biological father, Dad said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. But Cassie, baby girl, I have been your father since the moment you were born. I cut your umbilical cord. I held you first. I walked the floors with you when you had colic. I taught you to ride a bike and helped you with your math homework and walked you down the aisle at your high school graduation when you got that award. I am your father in every way that matters. But not biologically, I heard myself say, my voice sounding strange and distant, like it was coming from someone else. Who? I started, then stopped. The question was too big, too terrifying. Who is my biological father? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear everything, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the sound of a car passing on the street outside, the rustle of the wind in the trees, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears like a drum. Your uncle, Mom finally whispered, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. Your Uncle Richard. The world stopped. Just stopped. I felt like I was falling, even though I was sitting down, felt like the floor had opened up beneath me and I was tumbling into darkness. Uncle Richard. My father's brother. The man who came to every birthday party, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving. The man who taught me to play chess and always brought me books and called me his favorite niece even though I was his only niece. I jerked my hand away from my mother's, standing up so fast the chair fell backward with a crash that made us all jump. The sound echoed in the kitchen, sharp and violent. No, I said, backing away from the table. No, that's not, that can't be. I couldn't form complete sentences. My back hit the counter, and I gripped the edge, feeling the cold laminate under my fingers. You're lying. This is some kind of sick joke. But I knew it wasn't. I could see the truth written on their faces, in the way my mother's eyes pleaded with me, in the way my father, the man I had called Dad for 25 years, looked like he was dying inside. How? I managed to choke out. How did this happen? Mom stood up, reaching for me, but I flinched away. I saw the hurt flash across her face, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. Not when everything I thought I knew was crumbling around me. It was before your father and I were married, she said, her voice shaking. We were engaged, but we had a fight. A terrible fight about, it doesn't matter what it was about now. Something stupid. Wedding planning or money or something meaningless. I was so angry, and Richard was there, and he was kind, and we had too much to drink, and it just happened. One time. One terrible mistake. I felt bile rise in my throat. The kitchen was too hot now, suffocating. I could feel sweat breaking out on my forehead, could feel my hands shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the counter to keep them still. And you never told me, I said, and I barely recognized my own voice. It was cold, hard, nothing like the voice I usually heard coming from my mouth. 25 years. You lied to me for 25 years. We didn't lie, Dad said, standing up. We just didn't tell you. There's a difference. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that hurt my throat. Is there? Is there really a difference? Yes, he said firmly, walking toward me. I stopped when he held up a hand, keeping his distance. Cassie, when you were born, we made a decision. Your mother and I, we decided that I would be your father. Not Richard. Me. Because I loved your mother, and I loved you from the second I saw you, and I wanted to be your dad. Richard agreed. He stepped back. He let me raise you. Let you, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Like I was some kind of prize to be won or given away. That's not what I meant, Dad said quickly, anguish clear in his voice. Does he know? I asked suddenly, looking at my mother. Does Uncle Richard know that I'm his daughter? The look on her face told me everything I needed to know before she even opened her mouth. Yes, she whispered. He's always known. The room spun. I pressed my hands harder against the counter, trying to anchor myself to something solid, something real. Every family gathering, every holiday, every casual Sunday dinner, Uncle Richard had sat across from me knowing he was my father. Watching me grow up? Watching the man I thought was my father raise me. And he had never said a word. I need to leave, I said, pushing away from the counter. I need to get out of here. Cassie, please, Mom said, reaching for me again. Please don't go. Let's talk about this. Talk about what? I shouted, and I saw them both flinch. My voice was too loud in the small kitchen, bouncing off the walls. Talk about how you've been lying to me my entire life. Talk about how every time Uncle Richard looked at me, he was looking at his daughter and I had no idea. Talk about how my entire identity is a lie. It's not a lie, Dad said, his voice breaking. You're Cassie Morgan. You're our daughter. That's the truth. But it's not the whole truth, is it? I said, and I felt tears starting to stream down my face, hot and angry. I wiped them away roughly with the back of my hand. What else haven't you told me? What other secrets are you keeping? Nothing, Mom said desperately. Nothing, sweetheart. This is it. This is the only thing. How am I supposed to believe you? I asked, and my voice cracked. How am I supposed to trust anything you say ever again? I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and ran from the kitchen, my feet pounding on the hardwood floor. I heard them calling after me, heard my mother's voice rising in panic, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my purse and my keys from the table by the front door and burst out into the cool March morning. The air hit my face like a slap, cold and sharp, carrying the scent of wet grass and car exhaust. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice before I managed to unlock my car. I threw myself into the driver's seat and slammed the door, and only then did I let myself fall apart. I sobbed, great heaving sobs that shook my whole body, my forehead pressed against the steering wheel. The plastic was cold against my skin, and I could smell the faint scent of the vanilla air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, a smell that usually comforted me but now just made me feel sick. Everything was wrong. Everything was broken. The foundation of my entire life had just been ripped out from under me, and I was free falling with nothing to catch me. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my tears to slow, for my breathing to even out, for the windows to fog up from my breath. Long enough for my phone to start buzzing with texts and calls that I ignored. Long enough for the sun to climb higher in the sky, warming the car, making me feel sticky and uncomfortable in my sweatshirt. Finally, I started the car and pulled out of the driveway. I didn't know where I was going. I just drove, taking turns at random, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood blur past. The streets where I had learned to ride a bike, where I had walked to school, where I had driven as a nervous 16-year-old with my father, the man I thought was my father, sitting patiently in the passenger seat. I ended up at the park, the one with the big oak trees and the playground where I had spent countless hours as a child. I parked and got out, walking slowly toward the swings. The chains creaked as I sat down, a sound that brought back a flood of memories. Dad pushing me higher and higher while I shrieked with delight. Mom watching from a bench, smiling, calling out to be careful. Uncle Richard sometimes there too, standing off to the side, hands in his pockets, watching. Always watching. I felt a fresh wave of anger wash over me, hot and bitter. How dare he? How dare he watch me grow up, knowing the truth, and never say anything? How dare he play the role of the fun uncle, the guy who brought presents and told jokes, when he was actually my father? How dare he let me call another man dad when he knew that I was his? My phone buzzed again, and this time I looked at it. 15 missed calls. 23 text messages. Most from Mom and Dad, but 3 from a number I recognized. Uncle Richard. My finger hovered over his name. Part of me wanted to call him, to scream at him, to demand answers. But a bigger part of me couldn't bear to hear his voice right now. Instead, I opened his texts. The first one said, "Your parents just called me. I'm so sorry you found out this way." The second said, "Please let me explain. There's so much you don't know." The third said, "I've loved you since the day you were born." That's never been a lie. I stared at that last message until the words blurred. Loved me. He said he loved me. But what did that even mean? What kind of love was it that let him stand by and watch someone else be my father? What kind of love was it that kept such a massive secret? I typed back, "Don't contact me right now. I need time." Then I turned off my phone before I could see his response. The sun was fully up now, and the park was starting to fill with people. Young mothers with strollers, joggers with their dogs, an elderly couple walking hand in hand. Normal people living normal lives, people whose entire existence hadn't just been turned upside down. I watched them, feeling disconnected, like I was watching a movie of life rather than living it myself. A little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, ran past me toward the slide, her ponytail bouncing. Her father followed behind, calling out to be careful, to wait for him. She laughed, that pure, unself-conscious laugh of childhood, and scrambled up the ladder. He stood at the bottom, arms outstretched, ready to catch her if she fell. I had to look away. The image was too painful, too close to memories I now didn't know how to interpret. Had the man I called Dad, ever really felt like my father? Or had he always known I was someone else's child? Had he looked at me and seen Richard? Had he resented me? Resented Mom? I realized I didn't know anything anymore. Every memory was now suspect, every moment of my childhood now filtered through this new, terrible knowledge. That time Dad missed my dance recital because of work, had that really been about work? Or had it been too painful to watch Richard's daughter perform? That time Uncle Richard gave me an expensive necklace for my 16th birthday and Dad seemed upset. Had that been about the money? Or about something deeper, something I had been too naive to see? I stood up from the swing, suddenly unable to sit still. I started walking, following the path that wound through the park, past the pond where ducks paddled lazily, past the flower beds that were just starting to bloom with early spring crocuses. The air smelled like earth and new growth, that particular scent of spring that usually filled me with hope. Today it just smelled like dirt. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why now? Why tell me now, on my 25th birthday? What had changed? Had they planned this? Or had something forced their hand? I pulled out my phone and turned it back on, ignoring the flood of new notifications. I called my best friend, Maya. She answered on the second ring. Cass? Her voice was warm and familiar, and I felt tears prick my eyes again. What's up? Happy birthday, by the way. I was going to call you later, but since you beat me to it, she trailed off. Cass? Are you okay? You sound weird. Can I come over? I asked, my voice small and broken. Of course, she said immediately, concern flooding her tone. What happened? Are you okay? Where are you? I'm at Riverside Park. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I'll put coffee on, she said. Drive safe. I hung up and walked back to my car, my legs feeling heavy, like I was walking through mud. The drive to Maya's apartment was a blur. I barely remembered getting there, barely remembered parking, barely remembered climbing the 3 flights of stairs to her door. She opened it before I could knock, must have been watching for me. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside, wrapping her arms around me. She smelled like coffee and vanilla and home, and I let myself lean into her, let myself be held. What happened? She asked softly, guiding me to her couch. I sank into the familiar cushions, the ones we had spent countless hours on watching movies and eating pizza and talking about everything and nothing. I told her. All of it. The words came pouring out in a jumbled rush, tripping over each other, probably not making much sense. But Maya listened, her dark eyes wide, her hand gripping mine tightly. When I finally finished, she sat back, her mouth open in shock. Holy shit, she breathed. Cass, I don't even, holy shit. I know, I said, and I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my throat. I know. Uncle Richard? She said, like she needed to confirm she had heard correctly. Your dad's brother? The chess guy? The chess guy, I confirmed, and the laugh escaped, high and slightly unhinged. The guy who's been at every family event my entire life. That Uncle Richard. Maya stood up and walked to her kitchen, and I heard her pouring coffee, heard the clink of mugs, heard her opening and closing cabinets. She came back with 2 steaming mugs and handed me one. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth, for something solid to hold on to. "Okay," she said, sitting back down. "Okay. Let's think about this logically." "There's nothing logical about this," I said, but I appreciated her trying. "No, but let's try anyway," she said. "So your mom and Richard had a one-night stand before she married your dad. She got pregnant. She and your dad decided to raise you as his. Richard agreed to step back. Is that right?" "That's what they said," I confirmed, taking a sip of coffee. It was hot and strong and slightly bitter, and it helped ground me a little. "And they never told you," she continued. "For 25 years, they kept this secret. The question is why? Why tell you now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I didn't ask. I just ran." "Understandable," Maya said. "I would have run too. But Cass, you're going to have to talk to them eventually. You're going to need answers." "I know," I said miserably. "But I don't know if I can face them right now. Every time I think about it, I just feel so angry. And hurt. And betrayed." "Also understandable," she said gently. "But can I say something that might be hard to hear?" I looked at her, seeing the concern in her eyes, the love. Maya had been my best friend since 3rd grade. She knew me better than almost anyone. If she had something to say, I needed to hear it, even if I didn't want to. "Go ahead," I said. "Your dad, the man who raised you, he didn't have to do that," she said carefully. "He could have walked away when he found out your mom was pregnant with another man's baby. His brother's baby, which makes it even more complicated. But he didn't. He chose to stay. He chose to be your father. That has to count for something." I felt anger flare in my chest. "Are you defending them?" I asked, my voice sharp. "No," she said quickly. "No, I'm not defending the lying. That was wrong. You deserve to know the truth. But I am saying that your dad, the man you've called dad your whole life, he loves you. That's real. That's not a lie." I wanted to argue, wanted to push back, but I couldn't. Because she was right. Whatever else was true, whatever else was a lie, I knew that the man I called Dad loved me. I had felt it every day of my life, in 1,000 small ways. The way he always made my favorite pancakes on Saturday mornings. The way he came to every single one of my soccer games, even the away ones that required hours of driving. The way he cried at my college graduation. The way he still called me every Sunday just to check in, to hear my voice. "But he still lied," I said, my voice breaking. "They all lied." "Yeah," Maya agreed softly. "They did. And you have every right to be angry about that. I'm just saying, don't throw away 25 years of love because of one lie. Even if it's a really big lie." I sat with that for a moment, sipping my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. Outside Maya's window, I could see the city going about its business. Cars passing, people walking, life continuing on like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For me, everything was different now. What do I do? I asked finally, looking at Maya helplessly. I don't know what to do. Well, she said, setting down her mug. First, you finish your coffee. Then, you take a shower because, no offense, but you look like hell. Then, we order pizza and watch trashy reality TV and don't think about any of this for a few hours. And then, when you're ready, you decide what you want to do next. Talk to your parents. Talk to Richard. Or don't. But you do it on your timeline, when you're ready. Not before. I felt a rush of gratitude so strong it almost knocked me over. Okay, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Okay. That sounds good. And Cass? Maya said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Whatever you decide, whatever you need, I'm here. Always. I know, I said, squeezing back. Thank you. I did take that shower, standing under the hot water until my skin turned pink, until the bathroom was thick with steam, until I felt slightly more human. Maya lent me clean clothes, soft sweatpants, and a t-shirt that smelled like her lavender fabric softener. We did order pizza, pepperoni, and mushroom, our usual. We did watch trashy reality TV, some show about people buying houses they couldn't afford. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. My mind kept drifting back, kept picking at the wound like a loose tooth. Questions kept bubbling up, demanding answers. Finally, around 6 in the evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I need to go talk to them, I told Maya. I need answers. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Do you want me to come with you? I considered it, then shook my head. No. I need to do this alone. But thank you. Call me after? She said. No matter how late. I want to know you're okay. I will, I promised. The drive back to my parents' house felt longer than it should have. Every red light seemed to last forever. Every turn seemed to take me further away instead of closer. But finally, I pulled into the driveway. Both their cars were there, and I could see lights on inside. They were waiting for me. I sat in the car for a long moment, gathering my courage, trying to prepare myself. But how do you prepare for a conversation like this? How do you ready yourself to confront the people who raised you about a lie that spans your entire existence? Finally, I got out of the car and walked to the front door. It was unlocked, like always. I had grown up in a house where we never locked the doors during the day, where neighbors walked in without knocking, where home was a place of safety and openness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I stepped inside, and immediately Mom appeared from the kitchen. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. She looked like she had aged 10 years since this morning. Cassie, she breathed, and I could hear the relief in her voice. Thank God. We've been so worried. Dad appeared behind her, looking equally haggard. His shirt was still buttoned wrong, I noticed. He still hadn't fixed it. I'm here, I said, my voice flat. I have questions. A lot of questions. And I need you to answer them honestly. No more lies. No more secrets. If you can't promise me that, I'm leaving right now and I don't know when I'll be back. They looked at each other, then back at me. We promise, Dad said. Whatever you want to know, we'll tell you. I walked past them into the living room and sat down on the couch, the same couch where I had watched Saturday morning cartoons as a kid, where I had done homework, where I had fallen asleep during family movie nights. They followed me, sitting together on the love seat across from me, holding hands. United front. Why now? I asked. That's my first question. Why tell me now? Why today? Mom took a deep breath, and I saw her hand tighten on Dad's. Because Richard is sick, she said quietly. He has cancer. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt all the air leave my lungs. What? He was diagnosed 3 months ago, Dad said, his voice rough. The doctors say he has maybe 6 months left. Maybe less. And he wanted you to know, Mom continued, tears streaming down her face again. Before he dies, he wanted you to know the truth. He's been asking us for weeks to tell you. We kept putting it off, kept saying we needed more time, but he said he was running out of time. He said if we didn't tell you, he would. So you told me because he forced your hand, I said, and I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Not because it was the right thing to do. Not because I deserved to know. But because he gave you an ultimatum. That's not fair, Dad said. We've wanted to tell you for years. We just didn't know how. We didn't know when the right time was. There's never a right time for something like this, I shot back. But 25 years, that's not waiting for the right time. That's just cowardice. I saw him flinch, saw the pain flash across his face, and part of me felt guilty. But a bigger part of me was still too angry to care. You're right, Mom said softly. You're absolutely right. We were cowards. We were selfish. We wanted to protect you, but really, we were protecting ourselves. We didn't want to risk losing you. Well, congratulations, I said, my voice cold. You might lose me anyway. The silence that followed was heavy and painful. I could hear the clock ticking on the mantel, could hear the sound of a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood, could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Tell me everything, I said finally. From the beginning. I want to know exactly how this happened. Mom nodded, wiping her eyes. She took a deep breath, and I watched her gather herself, watched her prepare to tell a story she had probably hoped she would never have to tell. Your father and I met in college, she began, and her voice was steadier now, like she was relieved to finally be telling the truth. We started dating junior year. By senior year, we were engaged. We were so young, barely 22, but we were sure. We were so sure we were meant to be together. We were, Dad interjected, squeezing her hand. We are. She gave him a small, sad smile. We were planning the wedding, and it was stressful. More stressful than I ever imagined. My mother had opinions about everything, and your father's mother had different opinions, and we were trying to please everyone and it was just too much. We started fighting. About stupid things. The color of the napkins. The flavor of the cake. Whether to have a band or a DJ. I remember, Dad said quietly. I was working long hours at my first job, trying to save money for the wedding, for our future. I wasn't around as much as I should have been. I left her to deal with most of the planning alone. I felt overwhelmed, Mom continued. And angry. And one night, about 3 months before the wedding, we had a huge fight. I don't even remember what it was about. Something about the guest list, I think. But it escalated, and I said some terrible things, and he said some terrible things, and I told him maybe we shouldn't get married at all. I stormed out, Dad said, picking up the story. I went to a bar. I was so angry, so hurt. I thought maybe she was right, maybe we were making a mistake. And I called Richard, Mom said, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. He had always been kind to me. He was your father's best man, and we had spent a lot of time together during the wedding planning. He was easy to talk to. Funny. I called him crying, and he came over. He brought wine. We drank too much. We talked for hours. And then, she stopped, closing her eyes. And then it happened. We slept together. I felt sick. I could picture it too clearly, could imagine my mother, young and upset, and Richard, who I had only ever known as a middle-aged man but who must have been young once too, handsome, charming. I could imagine the wine, the tears, the moment when comfort turned into something else. It was one time, Mom said, opening her eyes and looking at me desperately, like she needed me to understand. One time, and I regretted it immediately. The next morning, I was horrified. Richard was horrified. We both knew it was a terrible mistake. Did you tell Dad right away? I asked. No, Mom admitted. I didn't tell him for 2 weeks. I tried to pretend it never happened. Richard and I agreed we would never speak of it again, that we would forget it ever happened. But I couldn't forget. The guilt was eating me alive. And then I realized I was late. Late, I repeated, understanding dawning. Your period. She nodded. I took a test. It was positive. And I knew there was a chance it wasn't your father's baby. We had been intimate, but not as often because of all the stress and fighting. The timing, she trailed off. The timing made it more likely that it was Richard's. So you told Dad, I said. I had to, she said. I couldn't marry him with that secret. I loved him too much to lie to him. So I told him everything. About Richard, about the pregnancy, about the possibility that the baby might not be his. I looked at Dad, at the man who had raised me, who had been there for every scraped knee and bad dream and first day of school. What did you do? I asked him. I was devastated, he said honestly. I felt betrayed. Angry. Hurt. I broke up with her. I told her the wedding was off. I didn't speak to her or Richard for 2 weeks. But you came back, I said. He nodded. I came back. Because I realized that I loved her more than I was angry. And I realized that the baby, you were innocent in all of this. You didn't ask to be conceived in the middle of our mess. And I thought about what kind of man I wanted to be. Did I want to be the kind of man who walked away? Or did I want to be the kind of man who stepped up? So you decided to raise me as your own, I said. I decided to be your father, he corrected gently. Not raise you as my own, but actually be your father. There's a difference. I didn't pretend you were biologically mine. I knew you might not be. But I chose to love you anyway. I chose to be your dad. What about Richard? I asked. What did he say about all this? Mom and Dad exchanged another look. Richard was, Mom hesitated, searching for the right word. He was conflicted. Part of him wanted to be involved, wanted to be your father. But he also knew that would destroy our family, would destroy his relationship with his brother. So he agreed to step back. He agreed to let your father raise you. But he stayed in my life, I said. He was always around. We thought that was best, Dad said. We didn't want to cut him out completely. He is your biological father, after all. And he's my brother. We hoped, that we could all make it work. That we could be a family, just a slightly unconventional one. Did you do a paternity test? I asked suddenly. Do you know for sure that Richard is my biological father? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. You never tested, I said slowly. You don't actually know. We talked about it, Mom said. When you were born, we talked about doing a test. But in the end, we decided it didn't matter. Your father, she gestured to Dad, was going to raise you either way. Knowing for sure wouldn't change anything. It would just be information we didn't need. Information I might have needed, I said, my voice rising. Information I had a right to know. You're right, Dad said. You're absolutely right. We should have tested. We should have told you. We made a lot of mistakes, Cassie. We know that now. I stood up, suddenly unable to sit still anymore. I paced to the window, looking out at the darkening street. The street lights were coming on, casting pools of yellow light on the pavement. I could see the Hendersons' house across the street, could see their porch light glowing warm and welcoming. Everything looked so normal, so ordinary. But nothing was normal anymore. I need to talk to Richard, I said, not turning around. I need to hear his side of this. I heard Mom make a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Cassie, she started, but I cut her off. No, I said firmly, turning to face them. You don't get to control this anymore. You don't get to decide what I know or when I know it or who I talk to. I'm an adult. I get to make my own decisions. And I've decided I need to talk to Richard. Okay, Dad said quietly. Okay. That's fair. Do you want us to call him? Set something up? I'll call him myself, I said. I pulled out my phone, looking at those 3 texts he had sent this morning. They felt like they were from a lifetime ago. What's his address? Mom rattled it off, and I typed it into my phone. It was only about 20 minutes away. He had always lived close, close enough to drop by regularly, close enough to be part of our lives. Close enough to watch his daughter grow up. Are you going now? Mom asked, and I could hear the fear in her voice. It's getting late. I don't care, I said. I need to do this now. I walked toward the door, then stopped. I turned back to look at them, these 2 people who had shaped my entire life, who had loved me and lied to me in equal measure. I don't know how to forgive you yet, I said, and my voice cracked. I don't know if I can. But I want you to know that I'm going to try. Because Maya was right. You didn't have to stay, I said, looking at Dad. You didn't have to choose me. But you did. And that has to count for something. I saw tears streaming down his face, saw him nod, unable to speak. Mom was crying too, her hand pressed to her mouth. But I need time, I continued. I need space to process this. So I'm going to talk to Richard, and then I'm going to go back to my apartment, and I'm going to take some time to figure out how I feel about all of this. And when I'm ready, I'll call you. But until then, please give me space. Can you do that? Yes, Mom whispered. Yes, of course. Whatever you need. I nodded and left, closing the door softly behind me. The night air was cool and damp, and I could smell rain coming. I got in my car and just sat for a moment, my hands on the steering wheel, my forehead pressed against it. I felt exhausted, wrung out, like I had run a marathon. But I couldn't rest yet. I still had one more conversation to get through. The drive to Richard's house was a blur. I barely paid attention to where I was going, just followed the GPS directions mechanically. Before I knew it, I was pulling up in front of a small brick house with a neat lawn and a porch light glowing. I had been here before, many times. Birthday parties, holiday gatherings, casual visits. But I had never really looked at it, never really thought about it as Richard's space, Richard's home. I sat in the car for a long moment, trying to gather my courage. Through the front window, I could see movement, could see a figure passing by. He was home. He was waiting. Finally, I got out and walked to the front door. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could, the door opened. Richard stood there, and I was struck by how different he looked. He had always been tall and broad-shouldered, with the same dark hair as Dad, though his had more gray. But now he looked thin, almost gaunt. His skin had a grayish tinge, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked sick. He looked like he was dying. "Cassie," he said, and his voice was rough, like it hurt to talk. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "Can I come in?" "Of course," he said, stepping back. "Please." I walked into his house, into the living room I had been in dozens of times before. It smelled like coffee and old books and something medicinal that I couldn't quite place. He gestured to the couch, and I sat. He sat in the armchair across from me, moving slowly, carefully, like every movement hurt. "How long have you known?" he asked. "About the cancer, I mean." "They told me today," I said. "When they told me everything else." He nodded. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I wanted to tell you myself, wanted to do it gently, but I was running out of time and they kept stalling." "Why did you want to tell me at all?" I asked. "Why not just let the secret die with you?" He looked at me, and I saw pain in his eyes, deep and profound. "Because you deserve to know the truth," he said simply. "Because I've watched you your whole life, watched you grow into this amazing, strong, intelligent woman, and I've been so proud. But I've never been able to tell you that I'm proud as your father. I've had to pretend to be proud as your uncle. And before I die, I wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that you're my daughter, and I've loved you every single day of your life." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. I wasn't ready to cry yet. I wasn't ready to let him off the hook. "If you loved me so much, why did you let someone else raise me?" I asked, and I couldn't keep the accusation out of my voice. "Why did you step back?" He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because your mother loved your father, the man you call Dad, and he loved her. And he was willing to raise you, to be your father, even knowing you might not be his biologically. How could I take that away from him? How could I destroy their relationship, destroy my relationship with my brother, for my own selfish desires? So you just gave me up," I said. "Like I was something to be traded." "No," he said firmly, leaning forward. "No, Cassie. I didn't give you up. I made a choice to let you have the best possible life. Your dad, he's a good man. Better than me in a lot of ways. He's steady, reliable, patient. All the things I'm not. I knew he would be a good father to you. And he has been, hasn't he?" I couldn't argue with that. whatever else was true, Dad had been a good father. A great father. But you stayed in my life, I said. You were always around. Wasn't that hard? Wasn't it painful to watch someone else be my father? It was torture, he admitted, and I saw his eyes glisten with unshed tears. Every single day was torture. Watching you call him Dad. Watching you run to him when you were hurt or scared. Watching him teach you things, help you with homework, walk you through life. It killed me. But it also filled me with joy, because I got to watch you grow up. I got to be part of your life, even if it wasn't in the way I wanted. And that was better than nothing. Did you ever want to tell me? I asked. Before now, I mean. Did you ever almost tell me the truth? 1,000 times, he said. 1,000 times. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time I saw you, I wanted to tell you. But I had made a promise to your parents. I had agreed to let them raise you, to let them decide when and if to tell you. And I kept that promise, even though it was the hardest thing I've ever done. We sat in silence for a moment. I could hear a clock ticking somewhere in the house, could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, could hear my own breathing, shallow and uneven. Do you know for sure? I asked finally. That you're my biological father? Did you ever do a test? No, he said. We talked about it, but we decided against it. Your parents thought it was better not to know for sure. And he paused, I was afraid. Afraid that if we tested and I wasn't your father, I would lose even the small connection I had to you. So I chose to believe. I chose to believe you were mine. But you don't know, I said. None of you know. You've all been operating on an assumption for 25 years. Does it matter? He asked gently. Would it change how you feel? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe. Maybe not. But I think I have a right to know for sure. You do, he agreed. Absolutely you do. If you want to do a test, I'll do it. Whatever you need. I nodded, filing that away to think about later. Right now, I had more questions. Tell me about that night, I said. The night I was conceived. I want to hear your version. He closed his eyes, and I saw pain flash across his face. It's not a memory I'm proud of, he said. Your mother called me, crying. She and your dad had had a terrible fight. She was devastated, thought maybe they were going to break up. I went over to comfort her. I brought wine, which was stupid. We drank too much. We talked for hours. And then, he opened his eyes and looked at me. And then we made a mistake. A terrible, selfish mistake that we both regretted immediately. Did you love her? I asked. My mom. Did you love her? He was quiet for a long moment. Not the way your dad loves her, he finally said. I cared about her. I thought she was wonderful. But I wasn't in love with her. What happened between us, it wasn't about love. It was about loneliness and alcohol and bad decisions. If I had been in love with her, I would have fought for her. I would have fought for you. But I wasn't, so I stepped back. That should have made me feel better, but somehow it made me feel worse. I was the product of a drunken mistake, not even a love affair. Just a moment of weakness that everyone regretted. I'm sorry, Richard said, and his voice broke. I'm so sorry, Cassie. I'm sorry for the circumstances of your conception. I'm sorry for the secrets and the lies. I'm sorry for not being the father you deserved. But I'm not sorry you exist. I've never been sorry about that. You're the best thing that ever came from the worst decision I ever made. I felt something crack inside me, some wall I had been holding up all day. Tears started streaming down my face, and I couldn't stop them. I'm so angry, I said through my sobs. I'm so angry at all of you. You all lied to me. You all kept this huge secret. And now I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know where I fit. I don't know if I'm a Morgan or A. I realized I didn't even know Richard's last name. We had the same last name because he was Dad's brother. What am I? You're Cassie, Richard said, and he got up slowly and came to sit beside me on the couch. You're Cassie Morgan, and you're smart and funny and kind and strong. You're a daughter and a friend and a person in your own right. Your biology doesn't define you. Your choices do. Your actions do. Who you are, that's not about who your parents are. That's about who you choose to be. But it matters, I said, wiping my eyes. It matters who I come from. It matters that I was lied to. You're right, he said. It does matter. And you have every right to be angry. But Cassie, don't let this destroy you. Don't let our mistakes define your life. You're so much more than the circumstances of your birth. I looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time. I tried to see myself in his face, tried to find similarities. We had the same dark hair, the same brown eyes. But so did Dad. They were brothers, after all. They looked alike. I couldn't tell if I looked more like Richard or more like Dad. Maybe I looked like both. Maybe I looked like neither. How long do you have? I asked quietly. The doctors, what did they say? 3 to 6 months, he said. Maybe less. The cancer is aggressive. I'm doing some treatment, but mostly just to manage the pain and buy a little time. There's no cure at this stage. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the anger and the hurt and the confusion, I didn't want him to die. He was still Uncle Richard, still the man who had taught me to play chess and brought me books and made me laugh. And now he was also my father, my biological father, and I was going to lose him before I even had a chance to figure out what that meant. Don't be sorry, he said. I've had a good life. Not the life I might have chosen, but a good one. And I got to watch you grow up. I got to be part of your life. That's more than I deserved. We sat together in silence for a while. The house was quiet around us, peaceful. Through the window, I could see the moon rising, nearly full, casting silver light across the lawn. Can I ask you something? Richard said finally. Anything, I said. Can I hug you? He asked. As your father, not your uncle. Just once. Can I hug you and tell you I love you and I'm proud of you, as your father? I looked at him, at this man who was dying, who had kept a secret for 25 years, who had loved me from a distance, who had given me up so I could have a better life. And I nodded. He wrapped his arms around me, and I let myself lean into him. He smelled different than Dad, like coffee and something spicy, maybe his cologne. His arms felt different too, thinner, weaker. But the hug felt real. It felt like love. I love you, Cassie, he whispered into my hair. I've loved you since the moment you were born. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. You're my daughter, and that's the greatest honor of my life. I love you too, I said, and I realized it was true. I did love him. I had always loved him as my uncle, and now I loved him as my father too. It was complicated and messy and painful, but it was real. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, both of us crying. When we finally pulled apart, I felt different. Not better, exactly. Not healed. But maybe a little less broken. What happens now? Richard asked, wiping his eyes. I don't know, I admitted. I need time to process all of this. I need to figure out how I feel, what I want. But I don't want to lose you. However much time you have left, I want to spend some of it with you. Getting to know you as my father, not just my uncle. I would like that, he said, and I saw hope light up his face. I would like that very much. But I need to do this at my own pace, I said. I need you to respect that. No pressure, no expectations. Just let me figure this out. Of course, he said. Whatever you need. I'm just grateful for whatever time you're willing to give me. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. The day had been the longest of my life, and I felt like I could sleep for a week. I should go, I said. It's late, and I'm tired, and I need to think. He walked me to the door, moving slowly. At the threshold, I turned back to him. Thank you, I said. For telling me the truth. For wanting me to know. For loving me all these years, even from a distance. Thank you for coming, he said. For listening. For giving me a chance. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with everything I had learned, everything I had felt. When I got to my apartment, I called Maya like I had promised. How did it go? She asked immediately. I told her everything, about the conversation with my parents, about Richard's cancer, about the hug, about all of it. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Wow, she finally said. Cass, I don't even know what to say. That's so much. I know, I said, collapsing onto my couch. I feel like I've lived a year in one day. How are you feeling? She asked. Right now, in this moment, how do you feel? I thought about it, really thought about it. Tired, I said. Sad. Still angry. But also, maybe a little bit hopeful. I don't know. It's all so complicated. It is complicated, she agreed. But you're handling it. You're facing it head on instead of running away. That takes courage. I ran away this morning, I pointed out. For a few hours, she said. But then you came back. You asked questions. You demanded answers. You went to see Richard even though it was scary and hard. That's not running away. That's being brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a mess. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you could be a mess and brave at the same time. Get some sleep, Maya said. Tomorrow is a new day. You can figure out the next step then. Okay, I said. Thank you, Maya. For everything. Always, she said. That's what best friends are for. I hung up and sat in the darkness of my apartment for a while, just breathing, just being. Outside my window, I could hear the sounds of the city, cars passing, people talking, life going on. My life was going on too, even though it felt like it had stopped this morning. I thought about my parents, about mom and dad, sitting in their house, probably not sleeping, probably worrying about me. I thought about Richard, alone in his house, dying, probably thinking about all the years he had missed, all the moments he had watched from the sidelines. I thought about myself, about Cassie Morgan, 25 years old, trying to figure out who she was now that everything she thought she knew had been turned upside down. The next few weeks were strange. I went to work, went through the motions of my life, but everything felt different. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body, like I was an actor playing the role of Cassie Morgan rather than actually being her. I talked to my parents a few times, short conversations where we were all painfully polite, dancing around the elephant in the room. I could tell they wanted to fix things, wanted to make everything okay, but they didn't know how. Neither did I. I saw Richard twice. Once for coffee, where we talked about his illness, about his treatment, about practical things. And once for dinner at his house, where he cooked, or tried to cook, though he was so weak I ended up taking over. We talked about my childhood, about memories he had of me growing up. He told me about the first time he held me, how tiny I was, how perfect. He told me about watching me take my first steps, say my first words, even though he had to pretend to be just the proud uncle instead of the proud father. It was painful and beautiful at the same time, hearing these stories, seeing my life through his eyes. I started to understand the sacrifice he had made, the choice he had made to step back. I didn't know if I agreed with it, didn't know if I would have made the same choice. But I understood it. I also started researching paternity tests. I found a lab that could do it quickly and discreetly. I thought about it for days, weighing the pros and cons. Did I really want to know for sure? Would it change anything? Finally, I decided I did want to know. I needed to know. I couldn't move forward without knowing the truth, the whole truth. I called Richard and asked if he would do the test with me. He agreed immediately, no hesitation. We went to the lab together on a Tuesday afternoon. It was quick and painless, just a cheek swab for each of us. The results would take 3 to 5 business days. Those were the longest days of my life. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my email obsessively, waiting for the results. Maya tried to distract me, taking me to movies and dinners and shopping, but nothing worked. I was stuck in limbo, waiting to find out who I really was. The email came on a Friday morning. I was at work, sitting at my desk, pretending to review a report. My phone buzzed, and I saw the subject line. Paternity test results. My hand shook as I opened it. I had to read it 3 times before the words sank in. The probability of paternity is 99.99%. Richard Morgan is the biological father of Cassie Morgan. I sat back in my chair, feeling dizzy. So it was true. It was really true. Richard was my biological father. Not maybe, not probably, but definitely. The man I had called Uncle Richard my whole life was actually my father. I don't know what I had expected to feel. Relief, maybe? Or devastation. But what I actually felt was a strange sense of calm. It was like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. I had spent the last few weeks in uncertainty, not knowing, and now I knew. The truth was out there, solid and real and undeniable. I forwarded the email to Richard, then to my parents. Then I put my phone away and tried to focus on work. But I couldn't. After an hour of staring blankly at my computer screen, I gave up and went home. My phone was ringing when I walked through the door. It was Richard. I answered. Cassie, he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I got the results. Me too, I said, sitting down on my couch. How do you feel? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. How do you feel? Relieved, he said. I know that probably sounds strange, but I'm relieved. All these years, I believed you were mine, but there was always that tiny doubt. And now I know for sure. You're my daughter. Really, truly, my daughter. Yeah, I said softly. I am. We were quiet for a moment, both of us processing, both of us trying to figure out what this meant, what came next. Your parents called me, Richard said. Your mom is pretty upset. Your dad, Richard paused. He's struggling. My heart clenched. I hadn't thought about how Dad would feel getting this confirmation. For 25 years, he had been able to tell himself that maybe, just maybe, I was his biological daughter. And now that possibility was gone. Now he knew for certain that I wasn't his, not biologically. I should call them, I said. Maybe give them a little time, Richard suggested gently. This is hard for them too. Especially for your dad. He's still my dad, I said fiercely. The test doesn't change that. He raised me. He's my father in every way that matters. I know, Richard said. And I think he knows that too. But it still hurts. Give him time to process. I hung up with Richard and sat with my phone in my hand, staring at it. I wanted to call Dad, wanted to tell him that nothing had changed, that he was still my father. But maybe Richard was right. Maybe he needed time. Instead, I called Maya. She answered on the first ring. The results came, I said. And? She asked. Richard is my biological father, I said. 99.99% certainty. How do you feel? She asked, the same question everyone kept asking. I feel like I need a drink, I said. Can you come over? I'll bring wine, she said. Be there in 20. She showed up with 2 bottles of wine and a pizza. We sat on my couch, eating and drinking and talking. I told her about the results, about Richard's reaction, about my worry for Dad. You need to talk to him, Maya said. To your dad. He's probably spiraling right now, thinking he's lost you. I know, I said. I will. I just need to figure out what to say. Tell him the truth, she said simply. Tell him that he's your dad, that the test doesn't change that. Tell him you love him. It sounds so simple when you say it like that, I said. It is simple, she said. The situation is complicated, but the truth is simple. You love him. He loves you. Everything else is just details. I thought about that after she left. Was it really that simple? Could love really be enough to overcome all of this, all the lies and secrets and hurt? I decided to find out. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. It was Saturday, and I knew they would be home. Dad would be reading the paper, Mom would be doing laundry or working in the garden. Normal Saturday things. I let myself in, calling out a hello. Mom appeared from the kitchen, her eyes red and swollen. She had been crying again. Cassie, she said, and she looked almost afraid. I didn't know you were coming. I need to talk to Dad, I said. Where is he? In his study, she said quietly. He's been in there since yesterday. He won't talk to me. My heart broke a little. I walked down the hall to Dad's study, a small room lined with bookshelves where he did his accounting work and paid bills and read. I knocked softly on the door. "Dad?" I said. "Can I come in?" There was a long pause, then I heard his voice, rough and tired. "Yeah. Come in." I opened the door and found him sitting at his desk, but he wasn't working. He was just sitting there, staring at nothing. He looked old, older than I had ever seen him. He looked broken. "Dad," I said, and my voice cracked. I walked over to him, and before I could think about it, before I could second-guess myself, I wrapped my arms around him. "He's still my dad," I said into his shoulder. "You're still my dad. The test doesn't change that. Nothing changes that." I felt him start to shake, felt him start to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. He wrapped his arms around me and held on like I was the only thing keeping him afloat. "I'm sorry," he gasped out between sobs. "I'm so sorry, Cassie. I tried so hard to be a good father to you. I tried so hard to make you mine. And now you know for sure that you're not, and I don't know how to." He couldn't finish. "Dad, listen to me," I said, pulling back so I could look at him. "Listen. You are a good father. You're the best father. You taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my homework and came to all my soccer games and walked me through every hard thing in my life. You were there for my first day of school and my first heartbreak and my college graduation. You're the one who taught me how to change a tire and balance a checkbook and stand up for myself. You're my dad. Not because of biology, but because of choice. Because you chose me every single day for 25 years. That's what makes you my father." "But Richard," he started. "Richard is my biological father," I interrupted. "That's true. And I'm going to build a relationship with him, especially now that he's sick. But Dad, you're my dad. You're the one who raised me. You're the one who made me who I am. And I love you. I love you so much. And that's never going to change, no matter what any test says." He pulled me back into his arms, holding me tight. "I love you too, baby girl," he whispered. "I love you so much. I was so afraid I was going to lose you. You're not losing me, I promised. You could never lose me. I'm your daughter. I'll always be your daughter." We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, both of us crying. Eventually, Mom came in, and she joined us, and we all held each other, the three of us, a family. Broken and complicated and messy, but still a family. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started to feel more normal. I had dinner with my parents once a week, and we talked, really talked, about everything. About their relationship, about the choices they had made, about their regrets. It was painful sometimes, hearing about their mistakes, their fears. But it was also healing. The secrets were out now. There was nothing left to hide. I also spent time with Richard. As much time as I could. Because the truth was, he was getting sicker. The cancer was progressing faster than the doctors had predicted. He was in pain most of the time now, even with the medication. He was losing weight, losing strength. He was dying, and we both knew it. We talked about everything. About his life, his regrets, his hopes. About my childhood, about all the moments he had watched from the sidelines. about what might have been if things had been different. It was bittersweet, getting to know him as my father, knowing that I was going to lose him so soon. One afternoon, about 2 months after I had learned the truth, I was sitting with Richard in his living room. He was on the couch, covered with a blanket even though it was warm outside. He was always cold now. I was reading to him one of the books he had given me when I was a kid, a fantasy novel about a girl who discovered she was a princess. He stopped me in the middle of a chapter. "Cassie," he said, and his voice was weak. "I need to tell you something." I put the book down, giving him my full attention. "What is it?" "I need you to know that I don't regret anything," he said. "I know that sounds strange, given everything. But I don't regret that night with your mother, because it gave me you. And I don't regret stepping back, because it gave you the father you deserved. And I don't regret telling you the truth, even though it's caused so much pain, because you deserve to know. I don't regret any of it." I felt tears prick my eyes. "I don't regret it either," I said. "I'm glad I know. I'm glad I got this time with you, even if it's not as much time as I would like." "I'm glad too," he said. "You've made my life worth living, Cassie. Watching you grow up, that's been my greatest joy. And these last few months, getting to know you as my daughter, not just my niece, that's been a gift. The greatest gift." "I love you," I said, taking his hand. It was so thin now, the bones prominent under the skin. "I love you, Dad." It was the first time I had called him that, and I saw his eyes fill with tears. "I love you too, sweetheart," he said. "I love you so much." Richard died 3 weeks later. It was peaceful, the hospice nurse said. He went in his sleep, no pain. I was grateful for that, at least. Grateful that his suffering was over. The funeral was small, just family and a few close friends. I sat between my parents, Mom on one side, Dad on the other, both of them holding my hands. It felt right, the three of us together. We were a family, unconventional and complicated, but a family nonetheless. I gave the eulogy. I talked about Richard as an uncle, about the memories I had of him from my childhood. But I also talked about him as a father, about the sacrifice he had made, about the love he had shown from a distance. I talked about the last few months, about getting to know him, about the gift he had given me by telling me the truth. There wasn't a dry eye in the room when I finished. After the funeral, after everyone had left, I stood by Richard's grave. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, the kind of sunset Richard would have loved. Dad came and stood beside me. We stood in silence for a while, both of us looking at the fresh grave, at the flowers people had left. "He was a good man," Dad finally said. "My brother. He was a good man." "He was," I agreed. "And he loved you. He told me that. He said stepping back was hard, but he did it because he loved you and didn't want to destroy your life." "I know," Dad said quietly. "We talked, before he died. We made our peace. He told me to take care of you, to keep being your father. Like I needed him to tell me that." I smiled through my tears. "You'll always be my father," I said. "You know that, right?" "I do now," he said. "It took me a while to believe it, but I do now." He put his arm around my shoulders, and I leaned into him, into the solid, familiar comfort of the man who had raised me. We stood there as the sun set, as the sky darkened, as the stars started to come out. "Ready to go home?" he finally asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." The months after Richard's death were hard. I grieved for him, for the father I had just found and lost so quickly. But I also felt a strange sense of peace. The secrets were out. The truth was known. And I had two fathers who loved me, one who had raised me and one who had loved me from a distance. I was lucky, in a strange, complicated way. I started seeing a therapist, someone to help me process everything that had happened. It helped, talking to someone objective, someone who could help me untangle all the complicated emotions. Anger and love and grief and gratitude, all mixed together in a confusing knot. My relationship with my parents slowly healed. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks. Times when the anger would flare up again, when I would remember the lies and feel betrayed all over again. But we worked through it. We talked, we cried, we forgave. Slowly, painfully, we rebuilt trust. One day, about 6 months after Richard's death, I was going through some of his things. He had left me everything in his will, his house, his savings, his possessions. It was overwhelming, sorting through a lifetime of belongings. But it also felt important, like a way to stay connected to him. I found a box in his closet, tucked away in the back. It was full of things related to me. Report cards he had somehow gotten copies of. Programs from school plays and concerts. Newspaper clippings about my achievements. Photos, hundreds of photos, of me at every age. He had been documenting my life, keeping track of every milestone, even though he couldn't claim me as his daughter. At the bottom of the box, I found a letter. It was addressed to me, in Richard's handwriting. My hand shook as I opened it. "Dear Cassie," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there to see what comes next for you, but I'm grateful for the time we had. I want you to know some things I might not have said enough when I was alive. First, I love you. I have loved you from the moment you were born, and I will love you beyond death. You are my daughter, my greatest achievement, my proudest accomplishment. Not because of anything you did, but because of who you are. You are kind and strong and smart and brave, and I am so proud to be your father. Second, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the secrets, for the lies, for not being the father I should have been. I made choices that I thought were right at the time, but I know now that they hurt you. I'm sorry for that pain. I hope you can forgive me. Third, don't be angry at your parents. They did the best they could with an impossible situation. Your mother made a mistake, but she's a good woman who loves you fiercely. And your father, the man who raised you, he's a better man than I ever was. He chose you, chose to love you and raise you, even knowing you might not be his. That's real love. That's real fatherhood. Honor that. Cherish that. Fourth, live your life. Don't let this define you. Don't let the circumstances of your birth limit who you become. You are so much more than the product of one night's mistake. You are brilliant and capable and destined for great things. Go out there and grab life with both hands. Be happy. Be yourself. Be everything I know you can be. And finally, know that I'm at peace. I got to watch you grow up. I got to be part of your life. And at the end, I got to tell you the truth, got to be your father openly, even if only for a little while. That's more than I ever hoped for. That's enough. I love you, Cassie. Always and forever. Your father, Richard. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet, where I could carry it with me always. That night, I had dinner with my parents. We ate Mom's pot roast, my favorite, and we talked and laughed and remembered. We talked about Richard, about the good times, about the complicated times. We talked about the future, about moving forward. I have something to say, I told them as we were clearing the dishes. They both stopped and looked at me, concern on their faces. I forgive you, I said. For the lies, for the secrets, for everything. I forgive you. It's taken me a while to get here, and I'm still working through some things. But I want you to know that I forgive you. And I love you. Both of you. Mom burst into tears, and Dad wasn't far behind. We all hugged, the three of us, holding each other tight. It felt like a weight lifting, like something that had been broken was finally starting to heal. Life went on. I went back to work, back to my normal routine. But I was different now. I had been through something that had shaken me to my core, that had forced me to question everything I thought I knew about myself. And I had come out the other side. Not unscathed, but stronger. More sure of who I was. I was Cassie Morgan. I was the daughter of two fathers, one who had raised me and one who had loved me from afar. I was the daughter of a mother who had made a mistake but who had loved me fiercely every day of my life. I was a friend, a worker, a person in my own right. I was complicated and messy and still figuring things out. But I was me. And that was enough. A year after Richard's death, I did something I had been thinking about for a while. I went to his grave, and I brought flowers, bright yellow sunflowers that he had always loved. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and I talked to him. I told him about my life, about work, about Maya, about my parents. I told him about the letter, about how much it had meant to me. I told him that I missed him, that I wished I had had more time with him. But I also told him that I was okay. That I was happy. That I was living my life, just like he had told me to. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees, and for a moment, I could almost feel him there with me. Almost hear his voice telling me he was proud of me. Almost feel his hand on my shoulder, the way he used to rest it there when I was a kid. I love you, Dad, I said out loud. Thank you for everything. I stood up, brushed the grass off my jeans, and walked back to my car. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and life was waiting. I had been given a second chance, a chance to know the truth, to understand where I came from. And I wasn't going to waste it. I drove to my parents' house. It was Sunday, our usual dinner day. When I walked in, I could smell Mom's cooking, could hear Dad in the living room watching a game. It smelled like home. It felt like home. Because that's what it was. Home. Not because of biology or blood or any of that. But because of love. Because of choice. Because of 25 years of showing up, of being there, of being family. Hey, sweetheart, Dad called out when he heard me come in. You're early. I brought dessert, I called back, holding up the pie I had picked up from the bakery. Mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, a smile on her face. Apple pie? She asked hopefully. Of course, I said, grinning. Your favorite. She hugged me, and I hugged her back, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. Dad came over and joined us, and we stood there in the entryway, the three of us, a family. We had been through hell and back. We had been broken and put back together. We had lied and been lied to. We had hurt each other and forgiven each other. But we were still here. Still together. Still family. And that, I realized, was what mattered. Not the biology, not the secrets, not the complicated history. But this. This moment. This love. This choice to keep showing up, to keep trying, to keep being family even when it was hard. I thought about Richard, about the letter he had left me, about his words. Live your life, he had said. Be happy. Be yourself. And standing there in my parents' house, surrounded by love, I realized I was doing exactly that. I was living my life. I was happy. I was myself. The circumstances of my birth didn't define me. The lies didn't define me. The secrets didn't define me. What defined me was this, the love I had for my family and the love they had for me. The choices we made every day to be there for each other, to support each other, to forgive each other. I was Cassie Morgan. I was a daughter, a friend, a person. I was complicated and messy and still figuring things out. But I was loved. By two fathers, by a mother, by friends, by people who chose me every single day. And that was more than enough. That was everything. We ate dinner together that night, the three of us, talking and laughing and just being together. And when I left, when I hugged them goodbye and drove back to my apartment, I felt at peace. The anger was gone. The hurt was healing. The confusion was clearing. I didn't have all the answers. I probably never would. But I had what mattered. I had love. I had family. I had myself. And as I lay in bed that night, thinking about everything that had happened, everything I had learned, everything I had been through, I realized something important. The truth had set me free. Not free from my family, but free to really be part of it. Free to love them fully, knowing all their flaws and mistakes. Free to be loved by them, knowing they knew all of mine. The lie had been a burden, even when I didn't know it existed. It had been a wall between us, invisible but real. And now that wall was gone. We could see each other clearly, love each other honestly. And that was worth all the pain, all the anger, all the confusion. I thought about what Maya had said all those months ago. Your dad didn't have to stay. He chose you. That's real love. She had been right. And I had been lucky, so incredibly lucky, to have a father who chose me, who loved me not because he had to but because he wanted to. And I had been lucky to have Richard too, to have a biological father who loved me enough to step back, to let someone else raise me, to watch from the sidelines so I could have the best life possible. That was love too, a different kind of love, but just as real, just as powerful. I had been loved my whole life, by multiple people in multiple ways. And now I knew it. Now I could see it clearly. And I could love them back, fully and completely, without reservation. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. The sun was streaming through my window, and I could hear birds singing outside. It was a beautiful day, full of possibility. I got up and made coffee, and as I sat at my kitchen table sipping it, I thought about the future. About where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be. I thought about Richard's letter, about his words. Live your life. Be happy. Be yourself. Be everything I know you can be. I decided to take his advice. I had been playing it safe for too long, staying in a job I didn't love because it was secure, staying in a city I had outgrown because it was familiar. But life was short. Richard had taught me that. Life was short and precious and not to be wasted. I started making plans. Big plans. Scary plans. Plans that excited me and terrified me in equal measure. I was going to make some changes. I was going to take some risks. I was going to live my life, really live it, not just go through the motions. And I was going to do it with the support of my family, my complicated, messy, beautiful family. Because that's what family did. They supported each other. They loved each other. They showed up for each other, no matter what. I called Mom and Dad that afternoon and told them about my plans. They were surprised, maybe a little worried, but ultimately supportive. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Dad said. "We're proud of you. Whatever you decide to do, wherever you decide to go, we're behind you 100%. I love you guys," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "We love you too," Mom said. "Always and forever." I hung up and sat for a moment, feeling grateful. Grateful for my family, for my friends, for my life. Grateful for the truth, even though it had been painful. Grateful for the journey, even though it had been hard. I thought about that morning, almost a year ago now, when I had woken up to the sound of my mother crying. When my world had been turned upside down. When everything I thought I knew had been revealed as a lie. It had been the worst day of my life. But it had also been the beginning of something new. The beginning of truth. The beginning of real, honest relationships. The beginning of understanding who I really was. I wouldn't change it. If I could go back, if I could choose to never know the truth, to live my whole life believing the lie, I wouldn't. Because the truth, as painful as it was, had set me free. It had given me the chance to really know my family, to really know myself. I was Cassie Morgan. I was the daughter of 2 fathers and 1 mother. I was the product of a mistake that turned into a miracle. I was loved and loving. I was complicated and simple. I was broken and whole. I was everything and nothing and exactly who I was supposed to be. And I was ready. Ready to live my life. Ready to be happy. Ready to be myself. Ready for whatever came next. Because I had learned something important through all of this. I had learned that family isn't just about biology. It's about choice. It's about showing up. It's about loving someone even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when it would be easier to walk away. My dad, the man who raised me, had taught me that. He had chosen me every single day for 25 years. He had chosen to be my father, to love me, to raise me, even knowing I might not be his biologically. That was the truest form of love I could imagine. And Richard had taught me something too. He had taught me that love sometimes means letting go. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back, is let someone else take the lead, is sacrifice your own desires for someone else's good. Both of them had loved me. Both of them had been my father. And I had been blessed to have them both, even if I hadn't known it for most of my life. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the city below. People were going about their lives, each with their own stories, their own complications, their own secrets. We were all just doing our best, trying to navigate this messy, beautiful, complicated thing called life. And I was doing okay. More than okay. I was doing well. I had been through something that could have destroyed me, that could have broken me beyond repair. But it hadn't. I had survived. I had healed. I had grown. I was stronger now. More sure of myself. More aware of what really mattered. And what really mattered was love. Not perfect love, not uncomplicated love, but real, messy, human love. The kind of love that makes mistakes and asks for forgiveness. The kind of love that shows up even when it's hard. The kind of love that chooses you every single day. That was the kind of love I had been given. And that was the kind of love I was going to give back. To my family, to my friends, to myself. I was going to love fully and completely, without holding back, without fear. Because life was too short for anything else. Richard had taught me that. Life was too short to hold grudges, to nurse wounds, to let fear hold you back. Life was for living, for loving, for being fully and completely yourself. And that's what I was going to do. I was going to live. Really live. Not just exist, not just go through the motions, but really, truly live. I was going to take risks and make mistakes and learn and grow. I was going to be brave and scared and everything in between. I was going to be human. I picked up my phone and called Maya. "Hey," I said when she answered. "Want to go do something crazy?" "Always," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "What did you have in mind?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm ready for an adventure. I'm ready to start really living." "Then let's do it," she said. "Let's go have an adventure." I hung up and smiled. This was it. This was the beginning. Not the beginning of my life. I had been alive for 25 years. But the beginning of really living it. The beginning of being fully, completely, unapologetically myself. I thought about Richard one more time, about his letter, about his love. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room, to the universe, to wherever he was now. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for telling me the truth. Thank you for setting me free." And then I grabbed my keys and my purse and headed out the door. Maya was waiting. Life was waiting. And I was ready. Ready to live. Ready to love. Ready to be everything I was meant to be. I was Cassie Morgan. And this was my story. Not the story of how I was conceived, not the story of the lies and secrets. But the story of how I learned the truth and survived it. The story of how I learned what family really means. The story of how I learned to love and be loved, fully and completely. It wasn't a perfect story. It was messy and complicated and full of pain. But it was mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because it had made me who I was. Strong and brave and capable of loving deeply, even when it hurt. Capable of forgiving, even when it was hard. Capable of choosing family, every single day, no matter what. That was my story. That was my truth. And I was proud of it. Proud of who I had become, proud of the family I had, proud of the life I was building. The sun was shining as I walked to my car. The air smelled like spring, like new beginnings, like possibility. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, truly happy. Truly at peace. Truly myself. I had been through the fire and come out the other side. I had been broken and put back together. I had been lost and found my way home. And home wasn't a place. It was people. It was love. It was family in all its messy, complicated, beautiful forms. I got in my car and started the engine. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I was heading in the right direction. Forward. Always forward. Toward life, toward love, toward everything that was waiting for me. And as I drove, I thought about all the people who had shaped me, who had loved me, who had made me who I was. Mom and Dad, who had raised me with love and patience and made mistakes, but always tried their best. Richard, who had loved me from a distance and given me the gift of truth. Maya, who had stood by me through everything and never wavered. All the people who had chosen me, who had loved me, who had helped me become myself. I was the sum of all of them. I was the product of their love, their choices, their sacrifices. And I was going to honor that. I was going to live a life that made them proud. A life that was full and rich and meaningful. A life that was mine. The road stretched out before me, full of possibility, full of promise. And I was ready for it. Ready for whatever came next. Ready to face it with courage and grace and love. Because that's what I had learned. That's what this whole journey had taught me. That love was the answer. Not perfect love, not easy love, but real, messy, complicated, beautiful love. The kind of love that shows up. The kind of love that chooses you. The kind of love that never gives up. That was the love I had been given. And that was the love I was going to give back to the world. I was Cassie Morgan. I was loved. I was whole. I was free. And I was ready to live.